The Sorcadin is a sorcerer and paladin multiclass which is capable of deleting enemies with a single attack, and then standing around to laugh while the remaining enemies fail to deal any substantial damage in return. This combo lets you take advantage of additional spell slots for more smiting action, and you even use a few more spells when the situation arises, rather than attempting to reserve all slots just for Divine Smite. You'll go deep enough in Paladin to get an extra attack, which greatly increases your damage output, and on the Sorcerer side, you'll improve your armor class, both of which increase the diversity and enjoyment of typical Paladin builds. For levels 1 through 5, we'll select the Paladin class, and this is because we want to unlock a feat and an extra attack as soon as possible. At level 1, you'll get access to a subclass, and both Oath of Vengeance and Oath of Devotion are viable here. Personally, I prefer Oath of Vengeance, and this is because it has access to a couple handy bonus actions. And since we'll either be using a two-handed weapon or sword and shield, that bonus action is something we can frequently take advantage of on our turn. Inquisitor's Might, gained at level 1, allows you to deal additional radiant damage, and Misty Step, gained at level 5, is a fantastic option for increasing your mobility. If I was playing a Githyanki, I'd go with Oath of Devotion to make use of Sacred Weapon, which increases your chance to hit. Now, there are certainly other abilities along the way for both subclasses, but these are the main ones I'd consider when choosing the subclass. Your ability scores will vary depending on which equipment and story choices you make. With Hair of the Hag and the Everlasting Vigor Potion, you could bump a starting strength of 17 all the way to 20, making something like Great Weapon Master for your first feat at level 4 very handy. For the sake of this guide, we'll build a character who isn't using any of these items or stat boosts, and you can tweak your ability scores or respec accordingly to optimize your character. That being said, we'll use 16 Strength, 14 Con, and 16 Charisma, which leaves 10 for both Dexterity and Wisdom, with our Intelligence dropped to 8. For skill proficiencies, I'd recommend Athletics, as well as Intimidation to start. At level 2, you'll get Divine Smite. Congrats, you're a real Paladin now. If you're unaware, this will be our bread and butter option. And there's 3 choices here. You can use an action when you make an attack, or 2 options for using it as a reaction when you land a hit or critical hit, and these can be configured using the L key. You'll gain a fighting style, and I find Defense to be a better choice here. You can make an argument for great weapon fighting as well, but be mindful that the majority of our damage comes from modifiers and not the actual weapon's damage itself. For prepared spells, I'd recommend Thunderous, Wrathful, and Searing Smite. This will give you options if the enemies have specific vulnerabilities or resistances, but for the most part, you'll use Divine Smite as your single target damage spell. I like to take Bless, which is beneficial when needed to boost attack or saving throws for several party members, and Compelled Duel. This character is very tanky, so this is a great option to protect a weaker party member, but again, most spell slots will be used for smites, especially the lower level paladin ones. Level 3 will gain a class feature, and this is Divine Health, which allows you to no longer be diseased, and in this game, it's really not a concern at all, so we'll just move along. For actions, we get Abjure Enemy. Now, this is an action, and typically we'll want to be making use of Divine Smite, but the ability itself actually is not too terrible. Vow of Enmity, gain advantage on attack rolls against an enemy. This is a bonus action and lasts for 10 turns. Excellent when you're against bosses, just increasing your chance to hit, allowing you to do more consistent and reliable damage. For Oath spells, if you're playing the Oath of Vengeance, you'll get Bane. This will not see very much use since it does take up a spell slot. However, Hunter's Mark, again, also very nice for bosses. You can use the spell and deal additional damage when you make attacks, as long as you maintain your concentration. For prepared spells at this point, I like to add in Command. This allows you to target a creature and cause them to flee, move closer, freeze, drop to the ground, or drop its weapon. The most common use I find for this is to have it drop its weapon. There's a number of very hard-hitting enemies that wield two-handed weapons, and this can potentially protect yourself or a party member from being knocked out. Level 4, we'll get another spell that we can prepare. In this case, I've taken Shield of Faith, but the reality is this is really just a Smite spell slot. It will not really make use of any spells this far out. For our feat choice, I would recommend choosing between Ability Improvement or Great Weapon Master. In the case of this video example, I'm going to go ahead and use Ability Improvement to boost my strength to 18. The reason is I just want to increase my consistency to land attacks as well as a little bit of increased damage. If you have a very high chance to hit at this point in the game, which is capable through other means as I mentioned, Great Weapon Master is an excellent choice. You receive -5 to an attack roll while dealing 10 additional damage. Great choice as long as you can still consistently hit, and you can toggle this on and off as you prefer. As a level 5 paladin, we'll get an extra attack. This essentially doubles the ability that we have to deal damage per turn. Very strong power spike for this character. We'll gain access to level 2 spells, And the oath spells that we get are actually very strong as well. Hold Person, incredibly strong for melee characters, and it doesn't matter if you're the one casting this or maybe you have another support character in your party that's capable of doing so, but any attacks from within 3 meters are always critical hits. This is an insane amount of burst damage that this particular character can take advantage of, so make sure that you check that out. Misty Step just dramatically increases the mobility that we have on this particular character. It's a very strong spell, and this is something that you will use spell slots for if you need to reposition yourself. And that doesn't always mean getting to safety. You can reposition yourself offensively to take out targets that might harm other party members. For prepared spells, I actually add an Aid at this point. Even though there's another Smite option with Branding Smite, I find that Aid overall is a better spell. And since we use the smites other than Divine Smite so infrequently, Aid has the potential of just buffing your party for an encounter where you know there's going to be a lot of damage going around, and I find that you'll make more use of this than the Branding Smite option throughout the course of the game. At level 6, we'll put our first level into Sorcerer, which will give us 4 cantrips, 2 spells, subclass. For the cantrips, I like to select Ray of Frost as well as Acid Splash for the reason that these have 18 meter ranges. Now, very useful because we don't have a ton of range options with this build otherwise, so this gives you a couple of different types of damage that you can deal from range. Shock and Grasp just gives you an elemental type of damage that you can do from melee range, and Poison Spray has the potential of being a short range AoE since this class also lacks in that department. For spells here, I would absolutely recommend Shield and Magic Missile. Shield has the ability to increase your armor class by 5, and you also take no damage from Magic Missile. It's really the boost to armor class that we're most interested in. This spell is absolutely worth using a spell slot. It can be used as a reaction, meaning you can see not only what the enemy is rolled, but what attack they're doing to you before you choose to use it. Magic Missile is nice just for taking out targets that are at low health at a distance, ensuring that you always hit them. For this subclass, we'll select Draconic Bloodline. You also gain an increase of 1 hit point per sorcerer level. We'll be putting 6 levels and potentially 7 depending on your preference, so you get a little bit of health there. It's not game breaking by any means, but it's better than nothing. For Draconic Ancestry, I find that red, gold, or brass are the best options. It's because you'll become resistant to fire damage, which is the most prevalent form of elemental damage you'll take from enemies through the course of the game. The Draconic Bloodline just allows you to customize your scales if you like to do so. At level 7, we'll gain an extra spell as well as 2 class passives for the Sorcerer. For the spell slot here, this will typically be a Smite slot. However, I pick up Thunder Wave in case I want to knock enemies away or potentially knock them off a ledge, but again, you'll typically reserve that for Smite. Class passives here, Twin Spell is incredibly powerful. This will allow you to make use of a spell like Haste and cast it on 2 targets rather than 1. The other option here, I like to go with Distant Spell. This will increase the range of spells, whether they're normally ranged spells or melee. However, most of the sorcery points here will go to using Twin Spell. At level 8, we pick up a useful spell as well as a very nice passive. For the spell slot, I like to take Cloud of Daggers. This gives this class an AoE option. And on top of that, with our class passive, we get Quicken Spell. Spells that normally cost an action cost a bonus action instead, meaning we can actually cast 2 spells in 1 round. And just a reminder, we often have that bonus action available, so a very strong power increase as well for us at this point. At level 9, we'll gain another cantrip, a spell, as well as a feat. For cantrips, it really won't make too much of a difference at this point unless you happen to still be missing something from the remainder of your party at this point. For a spell slot, I went with Enlarge. Again, you're really not going to see too much use with this, but I didn't have this spell covered otherwise, so it was nice just to have it in my arsenal. For the feat here, I would select Great Weapon Master. If you didn't take it previously, if you did, then you could go with something like Ability Improvement to boost one of your stats. Alert is also very nice since this character doesn't have a super high initiative. This will give you +5 to that, as well as Heavy Armor Master, which will increase your strength, which you may or may not need depending on where your ability scores are, or you could use a respec to adjust them. But reducing the incoming damage by 3 while you're wearing heavy armor adds up to a lot of damage throughout the course of the playthrough. At level 10, we'll be able to pick a 3rd level spell. I would strongly recommend Haste here, and I know some of you are going to say, what about Fireball? Well, at level 11, select Fireball. On top of that, we'll gain a couple of subclass features. We can get Elemental Affinity damage, deal additional Charisma modifier damage when we cast a spell of the fire element, as well as Elemental Affinity resistance. We can spend a sorcery point to gain resistance to that as well. At level 12, you can put a 7th level into Sorcerer or a 6th level into Paladin. The choice is really up to you. If you put that level into Sorcerer, you'll gain access to a level 4 spell slot, which I personally like Dimension Door, as well as Ice Storm. If you want some more AoE, go with Ice Storm. If you want some more mobility, go with Dimension Door. If you put the level into Paladin, you'll gain access to Aura of Protection, which will increase the saving throws of yourself and your party members. Now you can use all kinds of equipment with this build. Two-handed weapons work, or sword and board also is a strong setup, and the build functions from level 1, so you can adjust your setup along the way, making it very flexible to include with other party members. I hope you enjoy the build.